happened is that there was a tremendous backlash against that from the traditionalists, because the king was living in Kabul, which is kind of an urban island, but most of Afghanistan is rural, and especially in the south and the east part of the country, it's very tribal, it's very conservative, it's very religious, and it's very patriarchal. And in that system of life, women essentially live in seclusion. They have very little public in the way of public life. They rarely get educated beyond Quranic teaching and maybe sixth grade level of education. And there was a tremendous backlash against the king, and he was deposed. He had to go, and he died in exile. There was another attempt in the 50s, and of course the communists in the 80s, one of the, I think, the positive things they tried to do, they did some horrible, horrible things, but one of the positive things they tried to do is to try to help women. And in fact, it could be argued that women enjoyed more rights under the communists than at any other time. There were more women in universities, more women out there getting educated and working. And again, the reforms aimed toward liberating women, giving them more freedom, more autonomy, was one of the reasons why people went to war against the communists, because it was a slap in the face. It went against everything that the tribal system stands for. And now we're going through that struggle again. So the Taliban, is just the tip of the story. This goes back a long way. And women have been treated that way in some parts of the country, not everywhere, but in some parts of the country, for long before the Taliban, which is why when the Taliban left, in many parts of the country, nothing has changed for women. We're a long way from where we need to be in terms of improving the lives of women in Afghanistan.
But their treatment of women, is it based on Islam? Or is it based on their interpretation of Islam? Or is it based on their culture?
I kind of dismiss the notion that it's based on Islam, because if you go back to Islamic scripture, actually, for its time, Islam was a really revolutionary religion. Muhammad was basically a feminist. He gave more rights to women in the Arabic world, in that Bedouin tribal life than anybody had before him. I think a lot of it is really cultural. It goes to the sense of the very, very core of tribal life for a man is a sense of honor, a sense of protecting his clan, his family's honor. And there's no better symbol, representation of honor for a man in that system than the women in his family. They're to be prized, they're to be protected, they're to be guarded. And along with that is this unfortunate sense that women in some fashion are more immature than men, that they're not to be fully trusted, especially in a sexual way, and that they're much more impulsive than men are. And so there's not only the guarding the honor, but also a sense of both protection and also of domination. And I think largely it's cultural, certainly in Afghanistan, and as you know, parts of Pakistan where horrible things like honor killing are heard of. I dismiss the idea that it's based on religion alone.
Some people might read A Thousand Splendid Suns and literally interpret the lives of Maryam and Layla to be the life of a woman in Afghanistan today. Is that true?
I would caution anybody using a novel as a point of, and applying it as this is ultimately a novel, and it deals with characters' emotions and their inner lives, and it's a story. I would be appalled if this was kind of a manifesto on the state of women in Afghanistan. It's certainly not meant to be that. But I tried in this novel to represent two different segments of the female population in Afghanistan. The urban professional represented in the character of Layla, which was the kind of women that I grew up with, women who went to college and who were educated, who had aspiration and hope for their future, wanted to become professionals. And then the women who grew up in impoverished, religious, rural areas, for whom their hopes and their aspirations from life were much more modest.